Hello guys, before we get to the actual video, I'd like to just quickly set it up. This was part of our 24-hour charity live stream for Child's Play. If you would like to donate or find out more about Child's Play, we'll include a link in the description below. We'll also throw in links to our social media accounts so you can follow everyone who is involved with this. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start the video.
Hello and welcome to this next segment. So before I begin, I just want to remind everyone that this whole live stream, this 24-hour live stream, is all done for charity. Below you can find the link for Child's Play, where you can donate any little amount of money to help children in sick hospital beds, and we're trying to earn, as much as we can. We have some goals we want to try and meet, and to be honest, even if it's just $1, even if it's just 50 cents, we would greatly appreciate any kind of donation you can give us. So, and there'll be some real treats for those who, for the higher our donation barrier, we got some good stuff planned for that. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Ollie and Guy Gillionaire to talk about some obscure video games. So let's get this going.
Yeah.
Boom, you're in the chat. Hello.
Hey.
Hey. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Guy Gillionaire. How are you doing?
I am super.
Awesome. So, for those
We're live now?
Yes, we're live now. So for those who don't know Guy Gillionaire, he is a YouTuber from Japan who looks into a lot of more obscure things, Mario manga, Doki Doki Panic, Japanese festivals. You did a really great video on the Yumi Kojo technology festival that happened back in the 80s.
That's kind of my claim to fame. Yeah.
There's also your Kid Icarus anniversary video was also another really spectacular one. Like I even learned some things that I didn't know about the original game from watching that video.
Well, a lot of those things, especially in the Kid Icarus video, were things I learned after I had come to Japan. I didn't know them either as I was playing them when the game was new, but yeah, it's an interesting thing about this year that we live in, is that there are so many 30th anniversaries of all those NES games, and actually and this ties into my channel too, because I'm gonna drop a video after we're done here. The 30th anniversary of the Gold Zelda card.
Okay.
In 86, so if you want to count the program itself, that'd be 31 and a half years old, right? But the English version, the US version, came out in August 1987, August 22nd to be exact. And so I'm going to release a video that's in celebration of that.
The golden cart.
Well, it's not really about the cart. I found a manga book that has never been translated, tied into Zelda 1, but I decided to hold on to it until now to have it coincide with something, special for the game.
Neat. I look forward to that. I quite liked your Dr. Mario one, especially as I found a Super Mario Kart manga by the same author, and I could see the humors, the similar takes on humor coming through from that one and the one that I had in my own possession.
Well, all of those were made by the same artist, so and they do kind of follow a continuity. The first one was Super Mario Land, and Dr. Mario was the second one.
Yeah.
And if you read the Mario Land one and then you read the Dr. Mario one, you can tell the stories kind of continue.
Yeah. See.
So if you follow the chronology of every Mario game, which I guess World would be after Dr. Mario, and then Kart would come after that. I have.
Well,
anyway.
Kart has some weird continuity because both Dr. Mario and regular Mario are separate entities in that one. Which is, and Nurse Peach and regular Peach. It's truly bizarre.
The other thing is a lot of those books come in several parts. I'm not sure about the Mario Kart one. I think it's 3,
two.
but
is it 3? Is it 3 or 2?
It
might be 3 actually. Yeah.
World. I have the Super Mario World, but it's 7 parts. I would love to do it because it's really good. I mean, it's really, really good, but to translate and record 7 books would just take so much time. So maybe on a vacation.
Maybe
someday.
on a vacation. Well, all right, let's jump into this obscure gaming chat. So we've all kind of got our own sort of areas of gaming that we're more familiar with. And I believe for you it's the NES Famicom era of gaming.
Yeah, well, I might be the elder statesman in the room here, but
Maybe you.
Yeah.
I was about 10 when I got my hands on the NES, and I had the Atari 2600 before then. And getting afterwards, like at the end of 16-bit and at the beginning of the PlayStation 1 era, I was already working. I graduated school and all that, so the 64 and the GameCube and all that, I really didn't get into it too in depth, so I don't know what was necessarily rare or not. But for NES, yeah, we can surely let it go.
Yes. So
I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I was 10 when I was 10. The DS came out at 9 or 10, so I'm the youngin here. I'm the whippersnapper.
Oh, you're the millennials they're talking about. Okay.
Yeah. I'm the one who's killing all your industry and all your fruit and stuff. So.
I mean,
no, I'm not. I'm not. I was born in '97, so I think
You just missed being a millennial.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
not
like
sure.
that sweet spot where the Super Nintendo was. I was past the NES, but I was just before the GameCube. So a lot of my gaming memories are the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64, and the original Game Boy.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we were kind of talking about that last week as we were setting this up about the things we were going to talk about, and I don't know. I think recently the word like obscure or rare or hidden gem, right?
Yeah.
The meaning kind of gets like diluted so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you were alive, if you could think back to like 1988, okay, when Nintendo Power was like the only news that you could get, right?
Right.
And it was company dictated on top of that, right? You didn't know what was rare. You didn't know how many copies of something was. Basically, the games were in the store, and a lot of NES games went out of print very quickly, and the way that they controlled their inventory in the 80s, games went out of print if they were not popular enough, and if they were too popular or very popular, then they were sold out, and you just had to kind of like, go back to the store every few days and check for the newest shipment to come in, and when it was gone, you had to wait for the next one, right?
Yeah.
So there's the pre-eBay, pre-internet world where you don't have access to it, but then also like the pre-YouTube world where you don't have any information coming to you. You just have your circle of friends and what you have, and if you had no information about it, you didn't know it was even there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think obscurity is something that kind of grows over time. Like people don't like. I'm sure when Earthbound came out in America, people didn't expect it to be such the rare icon, like the rare commodity that it is today. Actually,
Yeah, well, it was in bargain bins,
Yeah, people were picking it up on the cheap, and then nowadays, when you look back, it's going for ridiculous prices on eBay because they just didn't
one
make
of the high school jobs I had was working at a Kmart department store, and I can tell you that like at the end of the NES, the top loaders were just stacked to the ceiling, and they couldn't get rid of them. Same thing for a lot of the late NES games, and when the Saturn went under, it was like $1 for each one.
Jeez.
So, but again, it's the kind of like the perception of value, right?
Yeah.
I remember at the end of the NES, people were just dumping their games because it was like 8-bit is over, and we're getting ready for 32-bit. So what's even the point of keeping these, right?
Mm.
But like I was saying to you over text a couple days ago, some of these games went out of print, and like in my circle, in my neighborhood, in our school, like games like Metroid were super rare, and you didn't know anybody that had one. And so you think about a game like that, like, oh, how could that be so rare? But it was just out of print, and that was the way it was. Where now you got a copy for 20.
A lot of it would have depended on where you were in the country, distribution and the like. And also there was there would have been that rental culture there that doesn't really exist today. So that would have changed what games people were able to play.
Yeah, well, the rental shop in my area, and I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA. I felt lucky because I know that guy that owned that store had to play games because he had everything, and he always had it as it was new, and he had like. I guess he just tried to like buy as much as he could, but even some of the games that were rare then and are rare now, especially a lot of the text-heavy RPGs, he had multiple copies in the store that you could rent. So like Dragon Warrior 2, 3, and 4, like you said, Earthbound. I remember that was available, and so you could rent some of these, but you couldn't buy them after they went out of print.
Right.
Okay, so we want to go to the list? Yeah.
Yeah, let's tackle our list, and as the main guest here, why don't you start us off?
Okay, now you said you captured some footage, right?
Yes, I have. So you let me know what the game is, and I will
I'll tell you what, go. We can play like Stump the Band or something. Just throw something up, and I'll go. All right?
You'll riff on it.
All right, let's get to my, where is it, media.
And thanks for putting up my new logo. One of the things I do is I change my logo with each video based on the topic of what it is.
Okay.
You're rocking an MTV style.
No, that's Comedy Central. But
I remember I read your description. Listen, I'm 20 years old and I grew up in England, so you got to excuse my.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, let's start with a game that I'm quite fond of as well. Like one I actually knew on the list that you talked about.
Okay. Well, I like this game because it's maybe it gets a bad rep as being kind of like a clone of Zelda 2, but I like that style of play. I guess you could throw Wonder Boy in there and a couple other games where, it's a 2D side scroller. I guess 2D. What am I talking about? Like, you can move around freely. I guess the map is left, whatever. Played Zelda 2. East 3 is another one that's kind of like that. But the thing that I liked about it was how they tied in the map of Greece and the ancient Greek mythology, which is always a topic that I was interested in, especially as a kid. And so it was a game that I had to have. Broderbund always put out good action RPGs. They also had Legacy of the Wizard, which in Japan is known as Dragon Slayer 4, the Dracely family. And I didn't know anybody that had this game. And I think part of the rarity or part of the obscurity was that this game came out in like, what, 88 or 89? I don't think that text-heavy games were really in demand at that point. Like I said, I'm kind of on the older end of the scale here, and I think anybody that was, it might have been like in high school at the time the NES was out, probably didn't play it much. They probably were into computer games or something like that. But I think maybe if you saw this game as a rental, and you got to do a lot of walking around, and there you go, look at the map. Like, I don't think your average 10-year-old could pronounce Peloponnesus, right? It's not even spelled there all the way. So I think that would turn people off. I think it's geared towards an older audience, and it's challenging. It's hard. No Game Genie, right, at the time. And so you've got to keep track of where you are on the map. You got to keep track of all the things the characters are saying. And so I don't know, maybe it just didn't sell as many as other games. And again, it's just like Zelda 2. So if you want to play this style of game, maybe just go for Zelda 2.
Yeah.
What do you think?
See, I've got quite a background in Greek sort of mythology, and so I didn't have an NES growing up, but I have one retroactively. And a friend of mine who did grow up with one had this game and suggested that I buy it. And I love Zelda 2, and I love Greece, so this kind of like appeals to me in all angles. So I've actually played and beaten this game, like 100%, which is quite the undertaking.
Yeah.
Because it can be very obtuse at times. Like this early section, when I was recording the footage, I completely forgot that I have to go talk to Zeus before I can do anything. Because no one will help me. None of the other gods will help me until you talk to Zeus. But the game doesn't tell you this. So I make my way all the way to Athena, only to have her push me away and say, "Who are you?" And I'm like, no. So, and this game has sections. There's a section where you have to grind all of these salamanders in order to get enough skin, which is a random drop in order to get a flame shield. Which is really, it's probably the worst part of the game. But there are other really good sections. I think that you have more freedom in this game than you do in Zelda 2. Ironically, this one has the Zelda 2 gameplay style, but that freedom of exploration that Zelda 1 has. Yeah. Which Zelda 2 lacks because of the fact that it's, it forces you along a sort of set path. You can't get here till you get said item, and you can do some things
you
out
can't break the boulder till you get the hammer, and that leads you I know what you mean. Yeah.
Whereas in this game, it's more like, can you beat this boss to get through? And if you can do it, like with just the club sword, then well, congratulations, you're pretty great. But otherwise, you need to go and you need to find the shield that can deflect attacks, and you need to get better weapons and more items. But I think it's a very challenging game, but I think it's an improvement over what, in some regards, it's an improvement over what Zelda 2 did. And if you're looking for a Zelda 2 clone, I think this is probably, in my opinion, this is the best one.
Yeah. Yeah, and he looks like Link, all right? He looks just like Link. And
the animations are very similar when he gets hit,
The colors are I know it's a limited color palette, right? But, I mean, the same purple is used in Zelda 2 in the background that I just saw a couple minutes ago there on the screen. And inside some of the houses, it's the same two-tone of gray-white. I mean, it really looks like Zelda 2.
I think it looks quite good, though. It looks surprisingly detailed, even though it's obviously working with that limited color palette. But yeah, the inside of these buildings, the way those women in the houses are standing, the way he moves when he gets hit, it's obviously inspired by Zelda 2 at least.
And I can't hear it, but the music is really good too.
Yeah, the music is quite good. Although the map theme is way too loud. Like as soon as you step in the map, it blares out really loud, somewhat obnoxious music. I remember not liking. But apart from that, the actual adventure, where it is now, is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so
Okay.
Ollie, you're up next. What game do you want me to just throw a random one out there, or?
You can do, yeah. It's up to you.
Sure. All right, let's do it
You're
like
the
this
host,
then.
so.
Let's chuck stuff out and hopefully get ready to talk about it. So I'm gonna pick probably your favorite, probably what I think is your favorite one of all of these.
Yeah, well, I've promised the people on Twitter that I'll talk about it. So
well, let's start with that one then. Boom. This is a Nintendo 64, originally for the Nintendo 64 DD.
That's right, yeah.
But then saw an international release in Europe, at the very least, on the GameCube.
Yeah, that was when it first got localized. This is Doshin the Giant, which I'm always going on about. Every time I go on a podcast, I somehow manage to talk about Doshin the Giant. It's a game I'm very, very fond of.
Yeah.
And it was created by a man named Kazutoshi Ida, who is a kind of very kind of humanist game developer. There's a great interview with him in the video series Toko Toko, which is about like Japanese culture and artists. And he worked on this game with Nintendo in the kind of I think it was 1999, 2000. It was released on the Nintendo 64 DD, and then like you said, later re-released on the GameCube. And it really feels like a kind of, it feels like the remnants of that sort of very experimental era for Nintendo. It's a very weird game.
Yeah.
It kind of, parts of it almost don't feel much like a game. And basically, what your goal in this game is, you're on a tropical island, and you essentially have to help civilization kind of get its roots. It's a god sim, so you play as the giant. When he's yellow, he's Doshin, the love giant, and he can also turn into Jashin, the hate giant, which is kind of supposed to represent the balance between kind of creation and destruction. So you help these villagers on this island. You bring them kind of things to help them build towns. You bring them, you can basically pick up the landscape. You can pick up trees. You can raise and lower the ground when he wibbles his arms around. And your aim is to have these villages construct different monuments, and so each village is divided into a color, and you can mix villages from different tribes to get different monuments. It's a very relaxing game, very, very slow. As you can see, it's very, very slow paced. Sometimes it can feel like a bit of a chore, especially at first. What happens is, as you help or hinder the villagers, they'll give you their love or their hate, and you'll grow bigger every time you absorb a circle of love or hate. As you grow bigger, you move faster, and you can jump higher. And basically, the whole thing feels quite clunky. It definitely felt like that on the 64 DD, and the GameCube version kind of, obviously adapted that. But it's got a great sense of atmosphere to it. So right now, if you can see on the footage, this is the hate giant. So he can destroy, he can shoot fireballs and smash buildings. There's no benefit to killing people and destroying their buildings, but you can just do it anyway if you feel like it. It's a strange game because it comes across as quite innocent, but it's got some surprisingly dark religious connotations in it. The game's ending, which I recommend looking up, has some really bizarre kind of biblical references in it, and there are a lot of themes of life and death and creation. And it kind of, I like it because it's sort of representative of a time when Nintendo they were really willing to take big risks. They were willing to kind of champion these very out there ideas, and it's a game that I think more people should play, even if it's not the most fun game in the world.
Yeah.
It's also got a really, really beautiful soundtrack, an acoustic soundtrack composed by a man named Tatsuhiko Asano, who's a kind of Japanese guitarist, and that's really worth listening to as well.
Okay. So yeah, I have an interesting history with Doshin because I had it when I was younger, and it was like one of the very few games that I just did not get at all.
Yeah.
And, I didn't understand why I could destroy, why I'd even want to destroy anything, and I ultimately ended up unfortunately selling it, which I do regret now, because I realize that nowadays I could probably play this game and be like, oh, actually, I get it completely.
Yeah, it'd be hard. I think it'd be hard for a kid to play this and appreciate it. Because to be perfectly honest, there are a lot of times where I wouldn't really say it's particularly fun. But it just has a really great atmosphere to it, and just if you look at what it's trying to do, that's what's great about it. I think.
Yeah.
It's one that I think is going to become increasingly harder to find as time goes on.
Yeah, I'm debating whether or not I pick it up now at all, or like while I can, or whether or not I wait and see if GameCube Virtual Console is a thing, and then get it on that.
Yeah, that would be nice. I love it on the Switch. That would be great. Yeah. Play it on the toilet or whatever,
You got any thoughts about this game, Gaijin?
Well, actually, I think my connection dropped out halfway through there, so I only saw the opening there, and I missed half of what you were saying. Sorry, but I've actually never heard of this game. I never saw it before. When I came to Japan, it was kind of like before the Wii, but it was actually really hard to find a lot of GameCube games, and I don't know anybody who actually had one. But it looks like, kind of looks like black and white.
Yeah, I think it's the same sort of. It's a God sim. I think like Black and White was like that, wasn't it? So.
But
yeah, that's a decent.
I'm with you on the idea that I don't think kids would want to necessarily sit down and play this game, and I mean, like, I guess the satisfaction comes from like the long game of it, like that you're gonna build up to something. It doesn't look like there's that much action to it, and some of it looks like you're just kind of sitting around waiting.
Yeah, basically. I mean, to be honest, it's a very mature game for its time, and I don't mean that in the kind of mature, Call of Duty sense, but more in that it's quite adult. It tries something that I think a lot of the games just at that point didn't really try. And the guy who made it, Kazutoshi Iida, has made a lot of games like that. He also directed Aquanaut's Holiday on the PS1, which is a game where you're in a submarine and you literally just drive around the ocean, and there's no goal to it. You're just supposed to be there and take it in, And I love it. It's great. It's really quirky and weird.
Okay. All right. So I guess I'll move on to my one then, and I'll talk about the my first one is the sort of main one I was originally what originally sort of inspired my idea to do this, and that is a Super Nintendo title known as Marvelous. Another Treasure Island.
Oh yeah, this is a great one.
Yeah. So Marvelous is a it's a Super Nintendo game created by Nintendo by Eiji Aonuma. It's the very first game he ever directed, back before his name was even Aonuma. It was before he got married and took his wife's surname. So which makes it like, unless you realize it's him and you see a photo, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't realize. You wouldn't know. And it's a very so the game was only released in Japan. There was supposedly plans to bring it to the West, but it came out. The problem is it came out after the Nintendo 64 had. So like you were saying before, Gaijin, where the Super Nintendo's out and lots of people are like, oh, well, 8-bit's gone. What's the point? Like getting rid of their games. This is what Nintendo of America felt like would happen with this one. No one would be interested in it. Because everyone's moved on to the 64 now and is playing in 3D. So the footage I've got is actually from a fan translation, quite a good fan translation, that I got so that people could read it. I actually own this game myself in Japanese on the Super Famicom, and it's very much inspired by Legend of Zelda, but it's also crossed over with a adventure game, a point-and-click style adventure game. So, if you can see from the footage, it has the same top-down perspective and a very similar graphical style to Link to the Past, which is a game that Aonuma and his team were working on with Miyamoto prior to this. See, Marvelous was like the Splatoon of its time, in that Nintendo took a bunch of all their brand new, fresh-faced developers, put them in a room and said, make a game. You can do whatever you want, make a game. And they were quite ambitious with what this game was going to be. It was originally planned to be for the Super Nintendo CD add-on, the one that eventually became the PlayStation. And it was going to have full animated cutscenes and was going to be about a pirate called Captain Maverick who went around hunting treasure. And because of the CD cancellation, they obviously had to scrap all the animated cutscenes and stuff. And they toned down the story to be about these 3 boys who are on a camping trip who accidentally find Maverick's treasure and have to rescue their camp instructor who gets trapped in the ruins by traveling from island to island to find all these magical like orbs. And the game isn't very combat focused. This is where the adventure aspect comes in. Whenever you need to investigate something, you get into this menu where you can move a cursor around and click on any objects to interact with them or talk to people. You can use any items you have in your inventory, and you can do this thing called teamwork, where if you have the 3 of them together, they can all like lift up a giant rock, which has a very early version of what I think is like Mario Party, where you just violently smash the A button as fast as you can to get them to lift anything up. Or like to pull an object along, you have to like smash the right button to pull it to the right and stuff like this. It's an interesting game because it's not like Nintendo didn't really do anything else like this at the time. It was taking almost like taking a PC game and putting it on the Super Nintendo. And another big part of this game is the fact that you have 3 playable characters. There's Dion, who's the small one who's meant to be really fast and can get into tight places and is the de facto leader. Then you have Max, who is this the really big guy, the chubby guy. He's the slowest, but he's also the strongest. He's the only one who can actually fight and does all the heavy lifting. And then you have Jack, who's the tall one and is the most... he can reach high places, he can jump the furthest, and he can do stuff like fish and fix gadgets because he's meant to be, a typical sciencey nerd. And you have to use the 3 of them together to solve puzzles. So you can have them walking around together, or you can separate them, and you need to use all their individual skills to make your way through the game. And I think I quite like it. I've played through this game completely, and it's very much, the story is quite interesting. All the different islands are very unique. And I think the setting is very different from a typical Nintendo game. It's not like they haven't really done a camping, this sort of aesthetic of American campsites before. And I like it. I think it's a game that could really do with a remake, because there are certain elements of it which for its time were fine, but now feel really dated. Swapping through items is a good example. It's a bit of a pain to manage 3 inventory systems where you can only equip 1 item at a time, and there are certain elements where I think like the section where you're pausing to click on stuff sometimes isn't as clear about what you can click on and what you can't click on. Like I think that this game is an interesting look at Nintendo trying something very different with their hardware. And it's a shame that it didn't come out in the West, because I feel like this game would be far popular and much more adored. And I feel like Aonuma has strong memories of it as part of the game. So when this game came out, the first one was actually released for the Satellaview in Japan, the Nintendo's online system, where there was a game where you'd run around the campsite and collect stamps. It was kind of done in advertisement for this game, and they did a few, and they tried to remake that on the GameCube. And
was it the minigame in Four Swords Adventures?
Yes, it eventually became Tetris Tracker, a Zelda game, presumably because they didn't feel like a marvelous game on its own would sell, especially one like that. So they had to implement, because Four Swords Adventures is like 3 separate ideas all rolled into one with a Zelda coating, and the marvelous game just ended up becoming a Zelda game because of it. And I feel like if Aonuma ever gets to step away from Zelda, if that ever happens, this might be a series he returns to. I definitely think that it's one that should get more love, especially because in Smash Brothers, I don't think it's been referenced. Maybe it
might have had a sticker in Brawl or something.
Yeah, but apart from that, there's no music from it, which is a shame because the music's quite good, and there's no like reference to any of the characters or any stage or anything like that, and I think that that's because of how obscure it is. So it's something
Well,
that
let me
I
ask
quite
you
like.
something.
Yeah.
Does it use the SNES mouse?
It doesn't use the SNES mouse, which I think
Ah,
it should do, because I think that would
yeah.
because it would the SNES mouse would work for the clicking aspect, but it wouldn't really work for this whole walking around the Zelda more
Yeah.
Zelda-esque aspect.
Mm.
If there was
It
a
does
way,
It
look
looks
like A
like
Link to the Past.
yeah,
it kind of looks like if you remade it for the 3DS and you had all the inventory stuff on one of the screens, and you could kind of like you could keep that interface and just kind of like click on the buttons instead of having like the cursor hand.
yeah.
It looks like it would work.
That's what I was originally thinking when I first played this. This was before the Switch and stuff. I was like, a remake of this on the Super Nintendo or the Wii U would be great, because you have the touchscreen functionality. With the Switch's lack of focus on that, I'm like I'm more hesitant of how they would go about a remake of this game. But it's still something I would like to see. So yeah, that's marvelous. It's Aonuma's first full directed game.
It's a good one. I think, yeah, like you say, it's clunky in places, but it does hold up today almost entirely on its charm. It is quite a charming game.
It is a very charming game.
It reminds me in parts of Earthbound, in other parts of A Link to the Past. I think you can see the influence there for sure. But yeah, it's another one that kind of probably when it came out was what stopped it being localized. And had it come out, I wouldn't be surprised if a game like this had that kind of cult status that something like Earthbound has.
Yeah. So that's my first one. So let's go back to you, Gaijin, and talk about another one of yours. One that I really want to hear your opinion about, because I tried playing this game.
Okay.
And I really struggled at points.
I think I know what you're talking about. Okay.
And it's not the pinball one. I know you can talk about for ages. That one was alright. It is a game very Castlevania-like.
8 Eyes. Okay, throw it up there on the big board. I really love this game, 8 Eyes, and okay, here we go. Yeah, and it to me there are kind of like 3 games that kind of like get put together to make this game. So 8 Eyes came out in 1990 in America. And I think just the time that it came out in 1990, it just gets lost alongside so many other games. I mean, you talk about Mario 3, Mega Man 3, Castlevania 3, which it kind of looks like anyway, right? It'd be harder for a smaller company to compete with those kind of games, and it just, to me, I think it just got lost. But you look at it, it looks like Castlevania. It plays a lot like Castlevania 2, I think, Castlevania 2 and 3. And the story, which is mostly explained, I guess, in the instruction manual, to me, it kind of feels like Crystallis. The world ends, and a couple hundred years later, you come out and you're trying to put things back together. And I think maybe you had trouble playing with it because it also, to me, kind of feels a little bit like the Mega Man games, because you had the map up there and you have to choose one of the areas to play, but you have to collect these 8 crystals that open up the final stage and everything. But you also have different swords that have different powers, and one sword that you find works on one of the bosses in only one of the stages. So you're going to end up probably the first couple times you play going through all these stages and getting to a boss and then having the wrong sword and it doesn't work and you get sent back. So but it's super challenging. You've got the bird there to kind of like offer a second attack, and I liked Castlevania. Okay, so just like we talked about Battle of Olympus because I like Zelda 2, I like Castlevania as well, and so I managed to get my hands on it, and it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, he's definitely got that Castlevania sort of feel, I realised. From the way he even walks up ladders and he looks and stuff.
Yeah, the speed of it as well, I think, really has that vibe.
Yeah, and even the knights there, it looks like they kind of just Took a Castlevania night and edited it down, right?
Yeah. I think the addition of the bird was an interesting choice when I was playing it. Like, because you don't jump as high when the bird is on your back, but yeah, it flies around and acts like a second attack that can hit things at distance. I thought that was quite a clever idea.
And it's got its own energy meter too.
Yeah, my issue came just, I think, from some of the levels. I tried doing Africa and I like fell down a hole, and I was like, okay, well I'm just gonna go this way now, and it just kept going for ages and ages and ages and ages, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so then I tried to go back up, and it was going for ages, and in the end I ended up just killing myself because I couldn't get out any other way. This stage wasn't too bad, and the Arabian stage I also tried was just really difficult.
Yeah. I think without a game genie or without a strategy guide, this is probably one of the hardest NES games there is, just because of the way that it's set up. With you have to choose the stage. Stages are really complex, and then if you don't have the right weapon, all that was for naught.
Yeah.
Right, and you have to learn how to control the bird. Which once you can do that, you can zip through the game pretty well. Mm-hmm. But it's well, it is what it is. It's an NES game from 1990 that is like a clone of Castlevania. So that's what it is. But I think the fact that it looks similar to Castlevania, and that it was caught up in like the NES's like most popular year, right? Where there's so many other games around it. If you were around then and you were at the store, you probably picked up a more popular game than this because there were just so many to get, right?
Yeah.
So that's my thought on it.
Okay. Yeah, I
good.
think it's
good. Perfect timing. Game over. Okay, next one.
Okay, so let's go to your next one, Ollie, and I'm going to go for another Super Nintendo game that I wanted to talk that Nintendo made. It originally released for the Satellaview and eventually got repackaged into a full retail game that is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, like, it's a real gem.
Yep.
I mean, the cheapest way to get a hold of it now is on the Wii U Virtual Console, but you got to have a Japanese Wii U.
Yeah.
It was also released. It had a number of sequels. This game. It was released on the Nintendo Power, which, not to be confused with the magazine, was a rewritable cartridge that released in Japan for the Super Famicom and the Game Boy, where you could basically take this cartridge to convenience stores and they put a new game onto it for you and replace the old one. The game is called Sute Hakun. It was developed by a studio called Indie Zero, which is a studio I really, really like. They've worked on Electroplankton, NES Remix, the Game Center CX or Retro Game Challenge game on the DS, and the most recent thing they're working on is Sushi Striker. They've also made a bunch of kind of weird games for Nintendo as a second party that are kind of like non-games. So they made that Louvre guide, you can get for the 3DS.
Oh yeah.
And the cooking guide game on the DS. And basically, it's a puzzle game, as you can see in the footage, and it's very, very simple, but the way its mechanics are used make it incredibly fiendish and smart. So you play as this character, Hakun, who's this kind of glass creature. He looks like he's got a kind of thing on his face like a hummingbird, looks like a kind of pipette. And you can do two things with this. You can absorb different colors and you can also absorb these blocks that are positioned around the stage. And so you can, by absorbing these blocks, you can move them to different locations, and you can also inject these colors into the blocks, and depending on the color of the blocks affects how they move. So red moves up and down, blue moves from left to right, and yellow moves diagonally. So you essentially have to move in these stages, collecting these shards, which are the kind of rainbow colored objects, and by manipulating these blocks, which kind of, it looks simple at first, but the way some of the levels are structured means that you have to kind of, you'll be doing kind of interesting footwork in the air to get from one block to another, and you have to take into account what colors you're able to access. Certain stages have certain colors available, or there's a limit on how many colors you can use per stage. and it's a very smart game that at the time when it released on the Satellaview was, I think, one of the most popular games available for it. To the extent that it had a number of sequels. One of the things they actually did was in the second game, the plot, which is essentially this giant rainbow has been shattered into shards, and you have to collect the pieces. They claim that the reason the rainbow had been shattered again was because of the popular demand of Satellaview users. So they blamed it on the player and everything, but it's a concept that kind of excels because of how simple it is, and I really feel like it's one of these games where if you brought it back today, a modern audience would really, buy into it. Like the way a game like Box Boy is popular, I could really see this, having something similar.
Yeah. No, I agree. This is a game that I haven't played, but I really want to try. But it's the price, and yeah, I didn't really have I didn't have access to the Japanese Virtual Console, so I never really got the chance to give this one a go. So
yeah, it's a shame. It's one of these games where you don't need to know any Japanese to play it. And there are a few games on the Japanese Virtual Console that were released through the Nintendo Power cartridge that, like, probably otherwise it's kind of almost surprising that they were re-released. They're the kind of games that are niche enough that people might not have heard of them. So if you can find a way to play this, I really recommend it. It really holds up today. It's got a really great soundtrack. And it looks pretty nice as well. Very nice. It's very, very simple, but that is why it's really good. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. We can't hear the music while we're talking about it. I wish we could, because we're only getting half the experience here. But I do have a Japanese Wii U. It's sitting right here, right next to me. So I think I'm going to have to see what my remaining balance is and go pick it up. But I do remember did the Wii U ever have a heyday? I don't know, but I remember in 2013 and 14 when they started to release some of these, and you get on Miiverse, and the like, I guess because you could cross regions, there were a lot of English speakers that would get in the Miiverse of some of these virtual console games and just like freak out. And they'd be like, some would just be like really, really like angry, like, oh, I can't believe you guys got the game that was in your region. I hate you, and others were like, oh, please say that you can release this, because it doesn't have any Japanese text in it. Just we want to play it, but you've given me something to spend my last 863 yen on.
Yeah, that might be the last Wii U game you ever buy. So
it might be. I don't think they're making anymore. Huh? Actually, I went down if you follow me on Twitter, which I know you do, but I'm just saying for other people, I always there's a mall near me, and I go there all the time, and I always post about what's going on, and the Wii U stuff is gone already.
Wow. Cleared out, made shelf space for empty Switch boxes, because no one can get that either.
Okay, so we'll do my last game, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up. So 2 each there.
Yeah.
And so which one of these do I want? All right. So this one's another obscure Super Nintendo title, but unlike the other ones so far from me, well, the last two Super Nintendo games, this one wasn't actually released in Japan at all. I said this is an obscure Western Super Nintendo title, but it was also still made by Nintendo. So the game I'm showing you uses the successor to the NES Zapper, the Super Scope, and it is a shooter where you play as a robot cowboy, and its name is Tin Star.
Another good one.
All right, good choice.
So, for those who don't know, Tin Star is a game where you play as it's a it swaps between 3 different style of plays. There's the first person mode, where where you shoot bottles, you shoot people at bars, you have to avoid shooting civilians, kind of like games like Hogan's Alley or Yoshi's Safari. Then there are games where you play as Tin Star, the titular cowboy sheriff, who, if there are any Brits out there who know the Dandy, it's
got that vibe.
Very much inspired by it.
It really has a feel of like you can tell it was made for a Western audience. So this character design, they're really great.
And so you play as the titular Tin Star as he goes around and stops bandits and helps his old ladies get from one town to another. And so as you can see in this section, it's like you have Tin Star on the sort of 2D plane as enemies are all jumping out at you trying to shoot you, and you have to use the super scope to shoot them back. And it looks very good for a Super Nintendo game. I think the animations are very like Western cartoon, and they look very appealing. Everything looks very like animated and stuff. Like when he gets hit, when enemies, especially the enemies when they jump up and down, and you can jump from area to area. Like he rolls under the thing and jumps back onto it. There's a lot of movement around the level with different power-ups you can shoot, health packs, time watches. There's a lot of stuff that you can get while playing to help improve your score. And every level then, or at least every few levels, has a boss. There's also horse riding levels where you're on the back of a horse trying to shoot, people rustling cattle, or people trying to hunt bandits trying to steal stuff, and you have to ride down and chase them. It was made by a UK-based developer, I think. It's either in UK or in Scotland. And it's weird because Nintendo financed and published the game and owned the rights to the game. Never released it in Japan. The game never got a sequel. And the company is actually no longer around. But Nintendo still, according to them, Nintendo still own the rights to this series. So whether they're even aware that they own this or not is up for debate.
I guess the hardware requirement would get in the way of a potential re-release.
Yeah, well, the fact that it's on the Super Scope means it's in the same sort of ballpark that Space Bazooka or Gumshoe is, where it's really difficult to re-release it on the Virtual Console without requiring the buying of an additional add-on. Like the Wii U tried this with Duck Hunt and re-released some NES Zapper games, where you could use the Wii remote as the controller, and they could potentially, they could have potentially done that on the Wii U, but the lack of Wii remote options on the Switch means that they need to reconfigure the Joy-Con to somehow work as a shooter, like there was in the same way that the Wii remote did.
Yeah, traditional kind of pointer, yeah.
Yeah, and while it is certainly possible, I don't think that it's something that might be happening anytime soon. So Tin Star is it's one of them rarer games. I actually don't know the price of it. I don't own the game, and I haven't seen like anyone selling it. So I'm not quite sure if it's really expensive or not. But it's certainly a game that I want to play through fully when I get a Super Scope, because those things are just massive. I have no idea where I would keep one.
Yeah.
But I like it. I think it's one of them sort of unsung Nintendo games that is really quirky, a bit like Sutehakon and Marvelous.
Yeah.
That Nintendo just never did anything with, and so no one knows anything about them. Which is a shame. I feel like need to try and reuse some of these IPs, bring back the brand, and see how modern day audiences respond to this.
Yeah, it's got a lot of character and a lot of charm, a lot of personality, I suppose is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But it's like a lot of second-party Nintendo IP where it's just kind of gone forgotten, really. I don't think this has been referenced in Smash at all, has it?
Not at all.
And that attitude seems to be taken towards a few of their Western-developed titles. Another one that comes to mind is Uniracers, which was, that was developed by a British studio, and it seems to have been, all but forgotten, especially by Nintendo. They don't seem to acknowledge a lot of these games, so it's a shame.
Yes. So, right. I think we're going to wrap this section up, so... Gaijin, thank you for coming on.
Thanks a lot.
Why don't you let the good people know where they can find you at?
Okay, well, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube at the username Guyjillionaire, which is kind of hard to spell, actually. It's you
We'll put a
misspelled
link
it there on the screen there, but GAIJILLIONAIRE. But if you just want to look up GTV on YouTube, and you can see the logo there. Well, it's covered up, but should be easy to find. If you want to see a lot of videos about things that are in Japan that are left behind, things that were not necessarily translated, things that are lost or forgotten, then I'd appreciate it if you come by and check me out. I have the book that explains what Yume Kojo was, and I solved the riddle of the mysterious event that led to Doki Doki Panic, which led to Super Mario 2, which I'd never seen anyone talk about before. But
yeah, if you like Super Mario 2, you've got to go and watch that video. It's essential.
Yeah. All right, and
I'm going to upload this video right now, exactly as we leave. It is a translation of the 1986 Zelda manga book for anyone, and it has never been translated in English before. So if you want to try something, see something interesting and rare and old, please go check it out. Thank you very much.
Okay, so coming up next, we have an interview with Liam Roberts. Robertson, yep, sorry. We have an interview with Liam Robertson, which is coming up for the next half an hour. We're going to take a very short interlude so I can go and use the bathroom. If you've liked what you've heard so far, remember that this is all a charity stream, and that donations are open down below. Any little will help, even if it's like 50 cents. It all goes towards helping children in hospitals. So please donate if you can, and look forward to the next piece of the next part of the show. All right, laters.
Thank you. Bye.